Hey, welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox. So earlier today I shot a video that I just put up on YouTube. It's like a 2.5-minute video, and I just did like the panorama, which you all have seen many, many times. And I'd like to discuss that a little bit because while we have a lot of land here at Shofar Mountain, how much is not that important, but we have a lot. You know, we're really only living on about 2.5 acres, and we're doing almost everything on 2.5 acres, and there's room to do more again on this plot. And I think that should provide hope to people who can't afford a big chunk of land, right? You can do a lot, do the best you can with what you got where you're at. You can do a lot. A lot of what we're doing just again on this 2.5 acres, I'm gonna start saying plot. I don't wanna keep saying 2.5 acres. A lot of what we're doing on this plot, you could do in suburbia. Now I know yards typically, not always, but typically aren't that big, but you could do a lot of the stuff here. And there was a good book, man, if I was at my library, I'd look for it, pull it off the shelf and show it to you. But I think it's called 5 Acres and Independence. It's an old book, man. I think that thing was written in the 40s. That's a pretty good book. There's a lot of books out there on basically homesteading on 5 acres. So let's get to that a little bit. The first thing you're gonna need is a garden. You're gonna need a garden. Now our garden, which is fallow this year, right? Let's go look at it a little bit. We can talk about it. Our garden is about 40 by 40 feet, I'd say. Maybe 45 by 45, roughly, that big. And we have not maximized it. Even when we were planting stuff in it, we haven't filled it completely with everything we could do. We could produce more food from that garden if we wanted to. What we have been focusing on, because when we got here, this land, this has all been made nice. This land was rough, very rocky, you know, rocks this size. Can you see that? Yeah, those rocks right there. This big and bigger. Cool thing is they're flat on two sides. They're great for building. And the soil was very, to the extent that there was any soil, because honestly it was big rocks, little crunchy rocks, huge rocks. It was rocks. To the extent that there was any soil at all, it was crunched up rocks and clay. Wasn't very good. And so what we did is the Back to Eden method, and I'm sure you can use other methods where you are, but I'm telling you, for terrible soil, marginal soil, BTE, it works. And we laid down cardboard that we got for free, and then we laid on top of that mulch. And after about 6 to 10 months, it all kind of breaks down nice, and dirt low appears. And so that plot right there, that whatever it is, 40 by 40, 45 by 45, that's good dirt in there. And we can plant a lot of things. You can do a lot with raised beds. You know, there's a lot of different gardening techniques. The thing is, thinking that one knows all about gardening when one doesn't garden is fantasy. The way to learn about gardening is put your hand to the plow. You got to get out there and garden. And the reason you have to garden, see, even the word gardening, that sounds like, oh yes, we'll grow a couple tomatoes and we'll grow some cucumbers. We'll make a nice little salad. No, man, you got to grow food that can support you, right? And so that's our garden. You're gonna need a garden. As far as being off-grid, I tell everybody this. I think it's easier to start on, well, I know it's easier to start on-grid, and I am not an off-grid moralist. You know, I don't think I'm better than anybody else because I'm off-grid. The truth of the reason why I'm off-grid, really, is because we couldn't afford to bring electricity and water into where we are now. Now, because of changes in things, mostly because they brought a power line into those chicken houses, which is a lot closer to our property now, we probably could afford to bring electricity in. But our needs now are met, right? We have enough electricity, and we've learned to do with less. We've adapted. We don't care. We just don't care. It's not a big deal. I said in a recent video, people can get used to anything. We've gotten used to the way we live, and we like it. And we like the independence. And as my wife said, when I told her, hey, sweetie, if you want, we could bring electricity in. I'm pretty sure we could afford it now. She's like, I don't want to pay the bill every month. So there you go. You're going to need a garden. Raising critters, you can do it. You know, we don't just raise our goats on this 3.5 acres, but mostly we do. We tie them out. You saw in the video earlier, and you know, let's go over there while we're talking. We move them around. We take 2 horse leads. I believe that's what they're called. They're like ropes with a hook at the end. We knot them together in the middle, hook on each end now, about 10 feet long. And we just wrap them around trees and move them. They're like our little lawnmowers. In the past, we have had goats strangle themselves. We figure their DNA wasn't good enough for us. Our goats no longer do that. They don't strangle themselves to death. The ones that lived figure it out. Our billy goat ties himself up in knots. He'll go around a tree and then under his rope. I mean, it's like, how did you do that? But he does that. And so I check on him a couple times a day and untie him. But goats don't take a lot of space. They're not like cattle. You could do it the German way and keep them in a pen of some kind that you make. And people, you know, a lot of people talk about stuff that they don't really know out there, including people who write books. You know, goats are excellent escape artists. You need a prison to keep them in. Well, 1, you can do what we do. 2, we have built goat enclosures that worked with cattle panels. And cattle panels typically come 16 feet long, and I think they're a little over 4 feet high. They're about this high. We just stick T-posts in the ground and we had one goat that kept getting out halfway and she'd get her foot stuck, and I let her stay stuck in the fence for like a day. She never did it again. Other people, when they have problem critters, be it cattle or anything else that start escaping, they eat them, right? Look at these little guys. We're almost at the problem stage for them where they're gonna start eating things we don't want them to eat, right? Right now they're cute though, and the dogs, yeah, new critters on the farm. All right, so you can keep animals in a small space. Chickens, easy to keep on, you know, just a couple acres. And chickens definitely provide you eggs. Kevin Musak posted, I don't know if he posted it here, but he might have in the community section, but I'm subscribed to his channel and I saw it there. He had a chicken tractor, and everything he does is nice. But they raised meat birds. Now, meat birds are a little different than the girls we have. Meat birds typically, and I'm not speaking for Kevin anymore, I'm just saying my experience, he can chime in. But meat birds are like a special breed. I think they've been morphed a little bit, and they get big fast, right? And so you buy them as chicks, you feed them a bunch of food, and they get big breasts, and you kill them. At about, I don't know, 8 weeks, I think, is when you kill them. And you bought them all together, you kill them all together. Because if to do otherwise is not cost efficient. And there's something else we got to look at, is economy on your little farmette, on your little homestead. If you want a hobby farm, my interpretation of hobby farm is you're doing it because you like it, you want to look like the cover of Mother Earth News, and you're not really concerned with the economics of it. In other words, you subsidize what you're doing. If you want to do that, cool. Go on with yourself. You'll learn a lot, and you will be able to reap the benefits of what you're doing. An example of that is eggs. Almost anybody who raises eggs isn't making money on it. You know, raises the chickens to produce the eggs that you eat the eggs. Because the industrialized chickens, even the industrialized cage-free chicken eggs that you get in the store, which if you ever look into how cage-free they are, man, that rooster's. I have my daughter's birds over here for a little bit while she's on vacation. If you look into how cage-free they're not, you'll see. You can't sell the eggs at a high enough price to pay for the feed that you're giving the chickens. Now, you can offset it a lot in the spring, summer, and early fall like we are now. We feed our birds probably more than we have to, but you can just let them free range and they'll do fine. My son watched Shofar Mountain, I don't know, for about 3 weeks once when my wife and I had to go do something. Maybe 6 weeks. I think it was when we had the flood in Kansas. And I came back and he said, yeah, I didn't feed chickens at all. I just let them out every day. And they fed themselves and they were all still alive. So you can offset that too. It's good to plan out. Here's another thing why small acreage, and I'm calling 2.5 acres small acreage, but man, you can do a lot on it. One reason it's better is to the extent that you can do everything you want on a little plot, it's more farm economics. You don't have to walk as far. You don't have to drive your four-wheeler or your pickup truck as far to do things if it's all neat and tight. And you know, people say, oh, but the animals stink. The chickens don't stink. Our chickens don't stink. Our chicken coop does not stink, and it's been there for a couple years. I think because it's big enough, and we do let our chickens out most days, so they're not concentrating, you know, nastiness in there. Our goats don't stink. Our billy goat, when he gets in heat or whatever it's called, he stinks at that time. But you don't smell him at the house. You know, you just kind of keep them away. But as far as their poop and urine in their pens, yeah, it starts getting a little ripe in their pens at times. And so then we just remove them from the pens and let them live somewhere else for a while. Again, basically within this plot of land. We just kind of move them around the periphery, chain them out in the woods, that kind of thing. So what else? Okay, one thing you couldn't do on a small plot of land is be self-sufficient in heating and cooking firewood if you wanted to do that. You can't raise enough wood to do that. And so we source our wood from elsewhere on the land. When I lived at High Prairie Acres, we would buy wood every year. I'd just have it delivered already seasoned and split, and you know, I'd stack it up in my woodshed there. So you can't be self-sufficient on that. But you do the best you can with what you got where you're at. You can still get wood, right? You can have it delivered by the truckload and just stack it up. Now you have a year's supply of firewood, you know. Water catchment, everybody should do water catchment. Again, it's starting to be a Kevin Musette commercial. The best video I've seen on it, and several Shofarians have done videos on water catchment systems, but the best one's by Kevin. Again, I think he posted it in the community section. If not, you can go to his site and watch it. It's more like a tutorial on how to do it. He has a really nice system. You should catch water. I remember, and I'm trying to put myself in the mind of many of y'all, because believe it or not, I used to be where you are, and sometimes that's easy to forget, for me to forget. I remember a good friend of mine made a rain barrel. He was a prepper, and he was getting into prepping, and he bought, you know, for $5 or $6 one of those 33-gallon blue plastic barrels, and he just cut a hole in the top of it and put his downspout in it and siliconed around it. And then he did this really cool thing that just blew my mind. He took a hole saw, which is You buy it in the drill bit section. And he drilled a hole in the side of the barrel, just the right size, and with a bunch of silicone seal, he put a hose, you know, a little spigot, brass one, in there, and then he put some kind of overflow thing. I thought it was amazing, and his skill and technical ability to do that was just amazing. That was sometime since 2000. That was after 2000 that happened, and looking back on how I looked at that then makes me laugh now. I mean, that is so easy to do. And it's only 33 gallons. You can do much better. But I remember being amazed, and I said, why are you doing that? He goes, well, I'm just trying to have a water supply in case our water stops. And I remember thinking, that is cool, man. So I guess my point there is, this stuff is not rocket science. There is room to fail, you know, to make little mistakes and learn from your mistakes. The best way to learn is do a little bit of research. Why not? You have it out there. You have YouTube videos and you know, books and stuff like that. Do a little bit of research and then go do it. Go do it. Go build a rain system. Go build a system in a 5-gallon bucket if that's all you have. You can do better. But just build one, a rain catchment system, so that when your community water goes boop, you've got X amount of water. And by doing that, you will learn how to do so much. I remember at High Prairie Acres, I had a barn and I wanted to put a wing off the side of it. And I did not know what I was doing. So I have a little book on building things, and I went away and I had friends help me shingle and do everything. And again, looking back on that simple task, it would be like just putting a little shed off of this, which I'm going to do someday when I put a deck right here in a porch. That's so easy to do. It really is. And again, 6 years ago, I didn't have a clue. You just start doing it, you know. So you want a garden, you want some critters, you want some water, you're gonna want some way to heat your house, you know, to try and get a wood stove put in it. And even if you can't source the wood, you can do that. You know, you can't do this in suburbia, build a pond, but man, a pond is it's a really valuable thing. And ours is actually starting to hold water better, which pleases me greatly. My intent when we built this pond was to have the water come all the way up to the edge, and you can see now it's down about 3.5 feet. It's never come up. This is about as high as it gets. Can you see it? I'm sorry. You see the pond? And so that's kind of small. If it would come all the way up to the edge, it would be bigger. Not only would it be deeper, but it would spread out more. But you know, our ducks love it. You could put fish in it. If you ate catfish, you could put catfish in it. And again, that's a really small one. But you do the best you can with what you get where you're at. It's also good for firefighting, right? I have a pump that we can just stick one end in there and squirt the hose out the other end, that kind of thing. What else did I show? Outbuildings. Outbuildings are your friend. You know, most people who live in regular houses don't want to have like rakes and shovels and table saws and you know, drills and all the things I have in my living room in your living room, right? And so you need to get some outbuildings. And again, you can buy one or they're really easy to build. You know, there's some really good videos on building sheds on YouTube. And again, anybody could do it. You really can. I'd say start with a small project and go from there. Learn by doing, right? Start doing stuff and learn how to do it. But you want to be food self-sufficient, you want to be water self-sufficient, you want to be heat, you know, and cooking self-sufficient. Those are the basics of a homestead, right? Now, what are you going to feed your critters in the wintertime? This is a real thing. When I lived in Kansas, one year I had the idea, we were on not that much acreage there, and I was going to take an acre and plant milo. Milo was something they grew all over Kansas when we moved there in 2000. And so I borrowed a guy's tractor, which I didn't know how to drive. He showed me. It had these big discs on the back. And I disked up an acre of land, and oh my gosh, Kansas, that part of Kansas, the land is like chocolate cake. It's just this rich black soil. It's awesome. And then I went to the feed store to buy Milo seed, and they didn't have any that year. But my plan was just to plant a field, just broadcast it with I had one of those little sacks that you put seed in and you turn the crank and it spits the seeds out. I was just gonna broadcast Milo out there and let it grow, and then go out there with a whacker, whack the heads off and store them in galvanized trash cans was my plan to feed the chickens over the winter. Now you can just go to TSC or the feed store and just buy a sack of feed. We just bought 200 pounds of feed. Sister Kate did yesterday. I got to unload it, and you know, it's nothing but a thing to buy it now. It's cost chicken feed. Doesn't cost anything. But you have to think about growing your own. You have to think about, what are you going to feed your goats? Now this is turning it more into homestead / Teowaki neo-pioneer homestead, right? You want to be self-sufficient, man. Think about, what are you going to feed your critters over the winter? There is a reason that people used to butcher in the fall. You know, starting in the fall is when you got to start putting your animals on feed, because there's nothing left for them to eat, basically. Well, we're having a little duck convention, and so they'd say, all right, we don't want to feed all these guys all the way through winter time. That's too expensive, too hard. So we're going to butcher a bunch, put them up, you know, smoke them, can them, whatever, dry them, and we'll just save our breeding stock to get us through to the other side. So that's why they would do that, so they didn't have to get as much feed in the winter time. Something else on your homestead, and we do it big here, is identify and take care of your wild plants, your wild edibles, and your wild like herbals and things like that. Whoops, sorry. This whole row back here, man, it's about 50 yards. It's blackberry bushes, about 10 feet wide, about 50 yards long. They just grew. And so what we do is we kill everything in there almost. That's a red bud, and they're real pretty in the spring, so we left that. And there's some sumacs that I didn't get to that are growing up in the middle. We're trying to cut them out of there because we want our blackberries to stay. We eat the blackberries, we can the blackberries. Sister Kate last year started drying blackberries in our solar dehydrator, and they're amazing. They get so small and so hard, like little rocks, and they are awesome when you put them in like pancakes or on your cereal. They plump back up, and they're just, it's wonderful, and it's basically free. Pulling weeds. See how hard that was? They just came right up. It's free to do, and you can store them in a mason jar on the counter. You know, no big deal. So we've identified those. We brought some weeds from Kansas, curly dock. There wasn't a lot of curly dock growing on our land, and so Sister Kate just brought some down. We eat curly dock, and now it grows everywhere because it's a weed. We brought our sunflowers down. Can you see those back there coming up? Those are sunflowers. They're going to get about 14 feet tall. We brought them from Kansas, and originally in Kansas they started growing from the chicken feed spilling over, and they started growing. Real little seeds, too small for us to eat, but the birds and the critters like them. My goats love to eat sunflowers. We chop them down right before they die. Right before when they're starting just to wilt, we start chopping them down and feeding to them, and they just love them. So it's like fodder and forage. What else? We plant perennials, not perennials. Yeah, perennials are forever, right? Yeah, annuals are, you got to replant them every year. We plant perennials, and they just keep coming and coming and coming. Strawberries. We have tomatoes, heirlooms that are just keep growing because we let them go to seed. Our lettuce goes to seed and grows back up again. Chamomile, walking onions. Doing things like that saves you work. It gets back to the economy again, and you can plant that stuff in a garden. Heck, even if you just have like flower beds around your apartment, you can plant this stuff in there most of the time. And it'll just keep coming back, and you're getting your hands dirty, you're learning about it, you're eating the produce that you get. And so yeah, you don't need 400 acres to homestead. The more land you have, in many ways, the easier it is, because it gives you access to more resources. But man, you can do a lot on just a couple acres if you want to. And so my phrase, I should probably do a t-shirt on that. Do the best you can with what you got where you're at. You can do a lot wherever you are. I suggest you start. And I guess I'll finish this up with just another idea that hit me. We started, I say we like I had a lot to do with it. Sister Kate started raising chickens when we lived in the capital city of a third world nation and a developing nation. And she just decided, because we always read like Mother Earth News and storybooks and all that stuff, she decided she wanted to raise chickens. They didn't have hardware or lumber stores there. And so she would go, this city had these huge dumps, you know, 2.5 acre sized dumps where they were just constantly smoldering, the trash piles. Wild dogs lived in there. It was like Gehenna. And she went in and pulled out some pallets and brought them home and busted off the boards and built this little chicken coop, found some wire somewhere. Next thing you know, we're raising chickens. And that's how our learning process started, right there. Started with 2 chickens. And they laid eggs. Somehow the one was pregnant and raised babies. Yeah, it's amazing. You can do it. That's my whole point. You can do it. Don't tell yourself you can't because you only live on, now we're coming back to the I can't video, because you only live on this much land. Man, you can do so much. I guess I'm not done yet. There's a family who I appreciate but don't like. I think they're called the Devares. And they used to have a website. I haven't been to it forever. They lived in like Anaheim or somewhere in California, Southern California, and they had all these pictures on their website from when they bought their rundown rambler house on 1/10 of an acre with like formerly concreted backyard that's all chipped up, and the front yard was like dirt with oil on it, and you know, whatever. It was just a mess. And these people turned that into just like a cornucopia garden of wonderfulness, and they produce so much food. If you Google Devares, and why I don't like them is they evidently trademarked, copyrighted the term backyard homestead, and they like send cease and desist letters to people who use it. Come on, that's so California cheap crap that you're doing there. You know, just irritates me greatly. But 1/10 of an acre, they're producing more food than they can eat. Matter of fact, I think that's how they make their living. They sell it. So you can do a lot with what you have. My recommendation to you is to start. Just start. Start doing stuff. Neil Strauss, I reviewed his book. He's a guy that also impresses me. I've never met him, but he impresses me. And he looked into becoming a survivalist. He wrote a book, 911 Emergency or something like that. Fully immersed himself in the survivalist movement, and it ended up taking with him a little bit. He got some law changed in LA or LA County, one of the two, to allow people to keep a milk goat as a pet. Because before that it was livestock, you couldn't do it. You can do a lot. Do the best you can with what you got where you're at. I'll see you out there.